Good morning, everybody, and welcome to The Art as Well. We've got a big lineup for you today, and we're coming from France, which is very unusual. And we're going to talk to Ciara Hambly first about that, and she's going to fill us in on why they're over there and who we're going to be meeting. Oh, sorry, before I want to mention two things. One is a congratulations to Paul McCormick, who's been on the program here, and he's had one of his works purchased by, or acquired, I think is probably the word, by the National Gallery, which is fantastic, and he's over the moon about that. So well done to Paul. He has an exhibition coming up soon, which we'll talk about as and when it arises. There are a few others that are upcoming, but I'm not going to mention them until the week of their particular exhibition. And the other thing to mention is that in the Arts Club, the United Arts Club, there's a wonderful exhibition by Caroline Canning, and it's on at the moment. I was there on Thursday, as a number of you were, and I was just really awestruck by the work. It's fantastic. If you get a chance, please go in and have a look at it. It's in Upper Fitzwilliam Street there in Dublin. And what was also very nice was that I met a lot of artists, some of whom I'd met before, but many who had featured on The Art as Well, whom I hadn't met in person. So that was lovely as well, a lovely experience. So do go in and have a look at that. All right, so let's go straight over to France and say hello to Ciara. Good morning, Ciara. How are you?
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Everything is wonderful, Alan. We're all very happy here.
Well, I think you've got better weather than we have.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, but I put on my shirt just to kind of get into the mood.
And we appreciate it.
Not at all. And I even brought a croissant this morning.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, on my walk, I went down to the shops and got a fresh croissant. So there we are. Excellent. So, Ciara, you're the proprietor of Hambly and Hambly, which is an art gallery up in Enniskillen, Northern Ireland. Can you tell us a bit about that gallery first?
Yes, so we founded the gallery 6 years ago, and it is a gallery which hosts visual art exhibitions, but we also are a cultural hub. So we invite musical recitals and literary recitals. Mm-hmm. And we have had a number of group shows, and we're now launching a series of solo shows. We've accumulated a large number of artists whom we represent, and I think we have a fabulous array of talent now that we're working with. And we try to work very closely with our artists and get to know them very personally and offer a different sort of experience as a gallery that's sort of beyond what the traditional white box gallery might be.
Yes, and you're very much north and south oriented, aren't you?
Yes, so our representation is we have as many artists, if not more artists actually, from the south as the north, and we have a number of international artists. We have some Irish artists that we represent who are living abroad. Thanks
for that, Ciara. So Ciara, coming back to where you are now, why are you where you are? What's going on there?
Well, nothing like an adventure, Alan, because in the boredom of lockdown, obviously we were all geographically, physically, and sort of mentally restricted during that time. I woke up one day and thought it would be a good idea and a good time to buy a house in France, and that I was just going to take the plunge and do it without actually visiting any properties, that I would do it online. Mm-hmm. I was very much, as we all were, living a virtual life at that time. And so I persuaded my husband that it really was a good idea and I wasn't mad, and yeah, let's go for it. And so we went all around France and decided which area that we would like to buy a property in. And I was a French and German teacher, so I had studied in Poitou, which is about an hour away from here. So I knew the Charente as an area, and we wanted to be relatively close to the sea, love La Rochelle. And so I stumbled one day across this house. It was actually quite an objective house buying experience. Whereas if you walk into a physical building, you sort of become emotionally involved. This was quite clinical, really, as a house buying purchase. But we bought the house anyway, and we hadn't seen it. We had a virtual tour with the estate agent, who was wonderful. And then that was in Easter time of 2020. 2021. And then we drove over for the first time last summer to see the house and to sign on it on the same day. So it was all very exciting, and we did feel a little bit nervous just before we saw it. We thought, what have we done?
I know.
But it has all worked out very, very nicely.
And tell me, did you have the idea of a residency in mind when you were buying the property? Was that a consideration, one of the boxes?
Well, it wasn't actually at the time that I was house hunting, but it came to me. My father actually died at the very start of lockdown on the 1st of April, 2020.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
And on his first anniversary, just after we'd found the house, we hadn't actually properly secured it. It came to me that it would be a wonderful place for artists to develop their creative practice, to bring artists together from the north and south of Ireland, and to bring them into France in an international and see how it affected their creative journey. And so I put a shout out online that there would be an artist residency in France. And it just grew legs enormously. And here we are, not that much longer later. So it was...
Yeah, so the title of the John Richardson French Residency is in honor of your dad.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Very good.
100%.
And how many entries did you get?
We got about 400 submissions.
Ooh.
And mainly from visual artists, with a fair representation from musical artists. But unfortunately, we didn't actually get any literary submissions. So that is something I would be very keen to encourage in the future, because we're very keen to recognize the relationship between visual art and literature and music, and how those artists really can bounce off one another, and how many artists are actually multi-genre artists. So, for example, Gary is a very creative man in terms of literature, and most artists are very much open to the various different forms of art.
So you got 400 in, slightly overwhelming, I would have thought. And how did you judge them? What did you put in place for that?
The judging process, when I decided that we would do this sort of Irish residency in France, I contacted the Centre Culturel Irlandais because I know the director there, and I asked her if she would help me with my ideas. And so I put together a sort of I suppose, terms and conditions agreement for anyone who would be applying for the residency. And she looked it over for me and said, yep, that's good, you're good to go. And she agreed to be one of the judges in the final round. So I did the initial shortlisting from 400 to 40. And then I approached people to act as a panel of judges. I did not wish to be involved in that final judging process because I knew I was going to be here, and also we'd had a lot of submissions from artists whom we represent in the gallery in Enniskillen, and we also had a fair number from artists that we had never represented. So I didn't want a conflict of interest, and we appointed 10 judges from...
I was just going to say that, you had quite a few,
yes,
including Eamon Colman.
Yes, we to act as one of the judges, and also more than that he agreed to act as a mentor for the artists who would be the artists in residence, the 3 finalists. Yeah,
very good. Okay, Ciara, thanks for that. I think we'll go over to Eamon now and just have a word with him and ask him about his experience in the judging, the whole episode of judging, and how they actually came up with the list of winners that they did. So Eamon, can we go over to you, and maybe I'll ask you to mute yourself, Ciara? Come back in when you like, but if you just mute yourself for a moment.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here. I'm actually, I suppose, putting on my other hat for this whole process. Early on in my career, I got very involved I was chair of the Visual Artists Ireland for too many years, really. And then I became president of the European Council of Artists. And the European Council of Artists represents 222,000 artists right across Europe. We had our headquarters was in Copenhagen. And while there, I realized two things. One is Ireland as a nation had great in-house residency programs, if you like. You know, it had Anna McCarrick, it had Kilrillick, it had writers' residence, it had various residency programs right across the country, but had very little outside of the Irish Cultural Centre in Paris, had very little else. So when Ciara came to me and said, listen, this is what we're thinking of doing, I was very excited by it and very, very honoured to be involved. It is a difficult and sensitive area to be a judge, especially as a visual artist myself, to be a judge on other visual artists. So my approach to that is to look at what the, you know, hopefully this residency will last for 20, 30 years. And lots of artists will get to participate in the residency program. So what you need to do is look at how is it going to affect the I suppose the process of what the artists are doing, how their work has developed in, you know, when you're looking at their slides, you can see a progression in the work through that process. And you know then that here's an artist who will use, being on a residency is not an easy thing. It is quite a, because you've stepped outside your comfort zone to a certain extent.
Yes.
You are, you know, what I was talking to Gary yesterday, and I was saying, you know, when you're in your studio working, even though you're not looking at previous paintings, those paintings are whispering to you. You know, they're informing you of what you're doing. Suddenly you're in a place where everything is new. And everything, there is no, I suppose, internal influence on the process of what it is you're doing. And I find that's the exciting thing about residencies. So when you're looking to choose an artist to go on a residency, that's what you look for. And you also are mindful of the fact that, you know, other artists are, it's always a very close thing. There's never, you know, huge gaps between. It's always a very close run thing. Now the Arts Council here in the South have now got a numeration thing going where they to enable them make a fair and valued judgment on, you know, so you fit certain criteria.
Yes.
And to a certain extent, that's what you're doing. And my response to those artists who didn't get to go is keep knocking on the door. That the only way that you will get grants of any sort, whether it be going to the Arts Council or whether it be going to the European Council of Artists for a grant, or whether it be keep knocking on the door, eventually you will open it. And that's the process that I would use. You know?
All right. So Eamon, we have 3 winners, 2 visual artists and a musician, and we're going to meet with all of them bar one, and that is Katarzyna Gajewska, and Kat for short. Makes it easier. She unfortunately there's a family illness and she can't be with us today. She's hoping to make the exhibition, which we'll discuss in a while. But what I do want to do is talk about her, why she was picked, and show a few examples of her work.
Great.
So could you talk a bit about Kat and why she was on the list?
Yeah, I think number one, France, in its very painting tradition, in its contemporary condition, is a very expressive painting tradition. There is very much a, inverted commas, European abstract landscape tradition happening in France, which is actually quite near what happens here. Kat is a very expressive painter. She is probably very akin to the American action painting of the the 1960s, early 70s, which is now being reevaluated by art colleges and the contemporary art practices. And also she brings to it a unique, I suppose, for one and not to appear, for want of a better word, a female strength to her canvases, to how she uses her brushstrokes, her coloring, her sensitivity onto the canvas is very much coming from that strong female contemporary role.
Am I right in saying that she actually paints with her fingers as well?
Yeah, she uses her full, I suppose, whatever tools are available to make the marks that she wants, and that's really exciting. That she is not coming from a 19th century tradition of painting. She's coming from, she is taking what was started in France with the Expressionists and moved right up to what we have now, but was also started in America with de Kooning and the abstract expressionist painters of the States. And she's taking that, and it's kind of really interesting, because what happened was that in Europe, the Second World War meant that American art, or European artists, moved to America and brought this tradition. Now it's coming back to Europe. And it is certainly being used, especially in former Soviet countries. Yes, it is being used in a particular way that is really exciting and really, really interesting. Okay. So that's why I was immediately drawn to her work. Sure. Okay.
Let's take a look at some of her work. We've just got four pieces. But before we do that, Eamon, I just want to show people where you are exactly, where the residency is. And that is the house in France, which Ciara and her husband own, and is the base of the residency. And you can see there's a few outbuildings as well. And they would house some of the studios, which we will actually see later on. But also, I did allude to the fact that there was a chateau involved, thinking that was actually where everything was happening. But in fact, it's close by, and it is where they are having their exhibition. And the exhibition happens on, I think it's the 7th of May. And it's a wonderful sort of Irish-French collaboration and promoting the artists in France, which is wonderful to see. And this is a picture of that lovely chateau where the exhibition will take place. And then that's the correspondence, is the name of the group exhibition, and Eamon is included in that. But we won't be showing Eamon's work today because we're looking at the winners. All right, a lot of you will be very familiar with Eamon's work, and he was on one of our shows, which was Series 1, Episode 40, to be precise. So if you haven't seen that, go back and have a look at it. So let's go and take a look. That's Kat there with some of her work. And this is the first work that we're going to show, and it's called Angular Blue. So Eamon, can you talk us through that?
On this work, one of the things that is and this is just observation, one of the things that is very hard with a contemporary abstract painting is to create push and pull, so that you are still using some of that tradition from the 19th and early 20th century, and you're creating a middle ground, foreground, and background. This painting has that. What it also has is that sense of I suppose, tactile connection with the landscape. And she really, I mean, to a certain extent, this paint could be mud that she is moving around on the canvas, because it is that she is aiming for. She is aiming for that sense of wetness, worked land, weathering. All of that is happening on the land. There are some really interesting these in either side of that main structure. There are those lines that are vertical lines, which actually create a sense of an avenue almost into the painting if you look at it. these are paintings that you need to take time to look at.
Yes.
They, you know, the one thing that I feel is really important about this sort of work is that, you know, the whole tradition of going into the gallery and looking at the painting and then spending more time looking at the title than you do at the painting. These are paintings that you really need to look at.
Are they quite large, Eamon?
As far as I know, it's about...
It's 140 by 100, 140 by 140.
Yeah.
And the title of that piece is actually Summer in Kerry.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Ah, sorry.
No, you're okay. I just thought I'd slip that in quickly.
No,
Sorry.
no, I appreciate that. Thank you. I obviously mixed up the slides. Okay, let's move on to the next one, Eamon.
Okay.
Ciara, do you want to tell us which one that is before I make a mistake?
Sorry,
Yeah.
it's Flowering Angiamosis, that one.
Flowering what?
Well, I can't pronounce it. It's a medical term. Flowering Angiamosis.
Fair enough. That's not on my list, but go on. Eamon, do you want to say a word on that?
Yeah, I actually, you know, to a certain extent, titles can be misleading or you know, I think this is a painting again about a visceral and tactile response to a landscape or a feeling. Catherine will be quite near my work in a way, in that my response to her is that she's painting the landscape as she feels it rather than as she sees it.
Yes.
And there are, I mean, what is really interesting about this piece is her uses of darks. Her tonal darks are all in the foreground of this painting.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that means that you have all of these avenues to run through and run down, which are I. Yeah. And that's what I find really exciting. This painting that has just come up now.
That's Blooming Carcinomas, by the way. That one is Blooming Carcinomas.
Okay.
Now, my personal response to this is a painting about climate change. And if you think about the way you know our land has become wetter, drippier, more I suppose slippage, and there's a lot of that. But it is very controlled paint, which is really beautiful. She is moving the canvas around as she's painting it. She's not painting it from one viewpoint continuously. And it is one of the things that I found really exciting about her work, was that you could see where she had kind of gone, oh, hang on, I like that, I'll move it, turn it upside down, I'll rework that, turn it back again, put it on its side. Mm-hmm. So she wasn't playing with one viewpoint that you were looking at. And that's, to me, really exciting. Again, look at the darks in this. The darks in this allow you to go through. Okay. You know, Tim, it's Kat. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce her second name. Tim Goulding is asking who painted it. Okay,
Katarzyna Gajewska is her actual name, but Kat for short.
Yeah.
But the description of
Polish artist who has worked in Ireland for quite a while. What is again really interesting about this painting is that even though there is a huge amount of movement in the paint in this, the paint is really clean. It is really, she is not allowing the paint to get muddied or interfere with the beauty of the colors that she is using. Again, this painting has a really interesting in that it is, you know, it's got that dark center to it, but all of those little lines up at the top are pushing the pictorial plane out to the edges, which allows you, both in your imagination and in your visual sense, to enter into the space.
Yes.
And that is actually really hard to do. She allows things to happen, like right at the bottom, there's an almost dead center in the canvas, there is a drip that has just happened. Now, I'm sure that happened accidentally, but she actually had the courage and the strength to say, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to allow that sit, because that helps create this sense of movement within the canvas.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much for that. That was very useful to have that in her absence. I
think I've known Gary and myself, actually, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I'm delighted to admit it. Gary and myself had a two-person show down in the Clare Morris Gallery a number of years ago, and I didn't really know his work until we were chosen by the owners of the Clare Morris to show together. I think what is interesting about Gary's work is that it is quite near music. He uses music, but he also uses texts, and that idea that text gets obliterated and painted out, and some of it left, is kind of almost again going back to Kat's work. It's weathering of the canvas by the artist. I find really exciting, and his use of color is extraordinary as well. So that's, part of the reason why he was chosen.
And by absolute coincidence, Gary was also on the Artist Well in episode 8 of the second series. So we can, if anyone wants to watch that, they can, of course. All right, thanks for that, Eamon. Let's go to Gary. So if you could mute yourself, and Gary, if you could unmute yourself, and we'll have a little chat. How are you getting on in the residency first?
Great.
Did you only arrive yesterday or the day before?
We arrived on Wednesday evening.
Wednesday, yeah.
We just sort of got our bearings just with where we are, and then on Thursday it was just, well, for me it was just I had brought some canvases over, so I just started to work. I just started stretching and priming and gesso, so yeah, it's it's a wonderful place.
Yeah. And you're in sort of an outdoor lean-to, aren't you?
Yeah,
barn, an open barn.
Yeah, it's open. I have a wall behind me where I can put work. I have a table set up. I have a kind of a clothesline thing. So the idea was I had to sort of, it's like Eamon referred to it earlier on about your comfort zone. You were taking yourself out of your comfort zone. Like my studio would be my kind of is definitely my comfort zone. Like, and it's I kind of refer to it. It's like as if you had a guitar and you play a guitar, and it's tuned into ordinary tuning. When you go on something like this, you nearly have to retune the guitar, like to an open chord or something. It's the same guitar, but you're playing a slightly different tune. So being here, it does, it does affect what you're doing.
I suppose it's bound to, yeah. Gary, would you like to show us around a little bit?
This is the studio here that I've kind of MacGyvered, and it's a case of just finding what is around that will sort of make the place work for you. I've been very, very lucky. I've got pretty much everything that I want to be able to make work. This is going outside the studio here. That's the house over there. There's Clara's studio there. She is, and then we have the garden. I mean, it's an extraordinary place, and the village that we're in, it's like as if nobody's here at all. But there are people here, but they just don't seem to come out. But
so it's a lovely quiet space for you.
It is that. And I'm very, 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 very lucky, and it makes you think more about, like, you're getting an opportunity to sort of think more about your process and to think about how you're working. I found myself very much zoned into the language, and the way the language kind of has a sort of a tone, and then sort of there's a sort of a musical thing going on with the language, and And when you don't understand, I don't speak French, and with that sort of situation, I find myself being more tuned into body language than, you know, and just watching people's expressions. And I do this, and text and language would be very much part of what I do.
Yeah.
So this gives me this sort of other opportunity to be able to rub the two of them off each other in a different language, you know. So,
and I think also, Gary, I mean, I know from the series you did with me, or the feature, that you're very much a family man, and you know, you're very influenced by your children. Here you've got a completely different influence.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's been again, it's like taking you out of your comfort zone. It's like the studio back in Ireland is. And there's a kind of similar shape, but having said that, I don't know what direction I'm appointing it here, you know. And that's another thing that I hadn't thought about. And like you were saying about my family being very much, even though they wouldn't be aware of it very much, but this is like, you know, you're definitely stepping outside your box.
And it's good. I mean, have you done this before? Have you been in residencies before?
I've been in residencies. I've been to Kilreelig many times. I've been up to Anna-McCarrig. I've been in the fire station. I've done residencies, but I've never done one abroad. You know?
Yeah, I'm sure that's quite different.
It's totally different, you know.
Right.
But in a great way, you know.
Yeah, and you're there for 2 weeks, Gary. Yeah.
Yeah, we're here for 2 weeks, and we have an exhibition then. Eamon and Kat and myself. I'd like to say hello to Kat as well now when I can. I love her work, and I'm just very happy to be in such good company and in such a fine place as well. And grateful to Ciara and the whole selection panel, and you know, even to meet Clara here is great. Like just because I work solitary. And
that's right.
You know, artist is good.
Yeah, good. Okay, let's have a look at some of your work.
Okay. Yeah.
And you can talk us through it.
Okay.
So that's you. You don't want to talk about
that? Yes, that is me.
Let's talk about this work.
Oh, yeah. This is here actually. This is going into the show in France. This is the Mother, the Daughter, and the Holy Spirit. It's about 3 meters by 1.5 meters. It's a triptych. It has had many lives. And then originally, and something I wouldn't normally do, it came from a smaller piece of work that I had on paper. And I just, I would collage pieces of work together, something that I feel has a good rhythm to it or a good sound. And this came from that. So I tried to work from the smaller piece onto the larger canvas. It wasn't working, so I just let it go, and I kind of became just. I sort of let myself go to it and went with my instinct. I kept some of the elements of the original work, but.
And can you tell us the significance of the title?
Yeah, that was something that it makes reference to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I often I live in a house with full of women, you know.
And so do I.
Yeah, you mentioned this before, so it was like, and that has its own dynamic, and it's my dynamic, you know. So I like to I just thought I'd just change that to suit the work, you know. And I think at the bottom there I have a light text again is like there's a light, a certain kind of light. That's from an Nina Simone tune. It's not directly referenced to the context of the song, but I just like the line, you know. Poetry does play a part in what I do, and I almost feel like there's this. Well, I hope that there's a kind of a sound that comes from my paintings that you nearly have to listen.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay. And this is your next one, I think, to tell a story.
Yeah, that's actually going to be in the show here as well. It's about 1 meter by 1 meter, and it would have started off something completely different, which is even the work that I'm doing here now would you know, it stays static for a certain length of time, and then it changes, as this one did. So again, I'm like, a lot of the work that I do is kind of storytelling, and this one is it's like a story with bits missing from it. You know, it's like a bad phone line. You know.
And Gary, do you go back to your work a lot? I mean, would you go through it and finish, or would you start something, leave it for a week even, and do something else and come back to it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I would work on various different things at the same time, unless I'm kind of unable to move from one piece of work. Generally, the larger canvases, I would find that once I start them, I find it hard not to keep going with them. But then there comes a point, and I'm sure many artists would think there comes a point where you have to step back.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of destroying a painting or making a wrong move, but I think that's part of the whole process of telling a story. So, but there are times where I feel I just have an instinct that I should stop and do something else. But having said that, though, I try to work on different things at the same time.
Okay. Right, and then there's just this and the next one to go. This is called A Perfect Day.
Yeah, this is a story. My daughter and I took my youngest daughter. She's 13 at the time. She's going to be 14 next week. But we took a day trip to Dublin, and we took the train, and we went into the GPO. We went into the Trinity, the Book of Kells. We went up to the museum. We went to the secret bookstore. We went to the market of Georgia Street. And she loved all this stuff. So, and she never stopped talking. So it's a story of the day, the 28th of August last year. And it was a story of the journey. I would use a circle a lot to almost as words. This canvas would be full of script, that you can't really see it in that picture, but it would be very literal, and there would be text written on the edges, almost like comic book text, you know, with phrases from poets, you know, or you know, yeah.
Okay, and then this is the last one, and it's called Guesswork #1.
Yes, this is a small piece on paper, and there was a stage where I wasn't firing on all cylinders, kind of thing. So artistically, so I thought, what I did was I taped off with masking tape. I taped off the edges of the paper, not straight, just crooked lines. And then I painted the whole the whole paper. Then I would remove the canvas, I'd remove the masking tape, so you get another picture. So I was guessing my way through that. Yeah,
very striking. All right, Gary. Well, look, the very best of luck, and good luck with the show as well on the 7th.
Oh, thanks very much, and thank you.
Not at all. Pleasure. Thanks very much. Lovely talking to you again. Eamon, I'm going to ask you to come back and do a little intro into Clara Treacy, who's our last guest.
Okay, great. Delighted to do so. One of the things that when we were coming up with the selection, I think all of the selectors agreed that having a composer, musician, a slightly different tradition, I suppose, than painting, you know, even though process is kind of similar, that it would be good to have somebody in the mix. What I find really interesting about Clara's work is that she is a songwriter, and her songs or her words are incredibly strong. But she also is coming from that, I suppose, 1970s, 80s tradition of kind of, I hope you'll forgive me for saying this now, slightly eccentric, but wonderfully creative processes that they use to make work. Kate Bush comes to mind. That kind of that from that period, who might think is an extraordinary artist. And I was really taken by her work. But she also uses video in a particular way that is very visual. And I find that quite exciting. So that's why, from my point of view, that's why she got selected.
Very good. Okay, thanks for that, Eamon.
Okay.
So if you could mute yourself, and we'll go to Clara. Clara, are you there? In your studio?
Hi, Alan. Thanks so much for that introduction.
Hi, how are you?
I've never been so described.
Well, there you are. Again, you're in a beautiful place there. You seem to be sort of outdoors rather than indoors, your studio.
Yeah, I'll show you here. I've
you have your own personal swimming pool, have you?
I do, yeah. I commandeered that. Gary's not allowed. There's a crocodile I do share it with. I don't know if you can see it.
No.
But yeah, no, it's absolutely idyllic. It's the first time that I've ever had a setup of synths outside. I couldn't believe it. Like there's plugs here and a shelter, so if it rains, I can just, that happened yesterday. We were down the road at another near the chateau, and I thought that there was clouding over, and I can just like run up. So yeah, I'm calling it. Well, Gary named it actually Studio Ping Pong. There's actually a lovely kind of demarcation with the line down the middle. So I've kind of got my music here and notebooks and books on the other side. So I suppose that's what songs are, music and lyrics. And it's very, as Gary was saying, you're taken out of your usual process, and I'm finding it very interesting to sit at both chairs. And I wouldn't usually have experienced the link between them. I know
So Clara, you started out in a different career altogether, in that you studied French, hence your French is superb, but you also studied law, and then you went on to work in a practice in Paris in law. So how was that, and what made you change your mind and say, forget about this, I'm going to do something else?
Well, I suppose it was just getting there and realizing that particular dream of maybe using the language, I think I kind of wanted to have an international life. And there were no, there's a lot of very creative and artistry in my family, but there was no one really practicing as an artist in a professional sense. So I didn't know I could write songs when I was in college. Like that only actually started when I was in the law firm. To, I suppose, keep my sanity, I had a notebook beside me on my desk, and I used to kind of write caricatures of the people. Like the guy I was working for was called, I shouldn't give his whole name, but anyway, he was Monsieur Sauvage, like Mr. Savage. Yes. And I was, even though he was a bit eccentric, he was an interesting character. And actually, I think I'm so grateful in a way that I've taken the scenic route down into music this way, because I do think that that environment, I only managed to stick at the law for 6 months, but while in there, I was actually in 2 different law firms because we moved to an international firm. And I was telling Gary, I think it was a really intensive way to improve your French, because you can have university French and then come over here and not have a clue what they're saying at lunchtime. That was really what got me. They thought I was super quiet and I wouldn't say anything, and I was just like, what is going on? And it was back in the the crash. So job, I was really keen to keep this job. And it's so crazy now that I was only 22 and I thought I had to have a job and go on. I just I really thought that was what you were supposed to do when you left college. Yes. And then sure, anyway, I was off in Paris, and somehow I just ended up meeting sound engineers and light engineers and musicians and writers. I'm one of my best friends to this day. I met her, the month after I arrived. She's Quebecoise, and she was studying theater, and she was always taking me to the cinema. And I just had this whole new realization that life could be much more than the 9-to-5 career. Yes. And I suppose then I managed to get fired from the law firm. I shouldn't really say this now. But I was in a bit of
intentional.
a rock and roll stage, and like I didn't tell my parents that. Like, I just said that I left. I didn't even tell them about that for a month because they were like, okay, what has happened to her? And then anyway, so I started working in a jazz club and behind the bar. And it was actually a really cool, like a special place. It wasn't like, there's lots of pretentious jazz clubs in Paris. And I mean, we had, as I used to call them, jazz goblins in like regularly. And they were all about their big solo. And but yeah, it was also like really open to like people from all over the world. And I met another, like, she's a wonderful jazz singer. She's still based there, Liv Monaghan. She's from Cork. I met her there. We used to perform together, like we made a cabaret show, and like, yeah, so it took me 2 years of working there without singing a note. And then finally, actually weirdly, I went off and my parents were, I think, slightly panicking about me, and my mother encouraged me to do a master's in international marketing. So I ended up doing this, but it was with the Smurfit and Borbia, but I was based in Paris, and actually weirdly, it was doing that master's, which was nothing to do with music at all, but it was so, like, you know, we had to get up and start giving presentations in front of Carrefour and like boardrooms. And actually I find like doing that gave me such confidence that like I then ended up like leaving the food industry and marketing kind of, and working then in the jazz club again, but performing.
Yes.
And that's sort of how I got into it. That was about 10 years ago.
Okay, I want to give people a flavor of the sort of work you do, the sort of compositions you make. And we're going to show a video now. And I'd like you just to explain the theme of it, okay? And also the making of the video, because it's a very intense video and extremely well put together, if I might say. So, but I don't know any more than that. So could you just give us a bit of an intro to that video?
Yeah, so that song is Harry Clark. And obviously, you know, inspired by the man himself. And I was living in Phibsborough up until actually until October. I was there for about 6 years, and I used to visit the Eve of St. Agnes all the time in the Hewley Gallery. And I was kind of in this for most of my time in Dublin. I was in this very tumultuous romance. And at one point I was just thinking, okay, I just had this idea. I was like, you know, it's so beautiful. When it's beautiful, I'll just pretend like, you know, we are like the nymphs in that window, and just like pretend, you know, just leave it there, Clara, admire it, don't be going back into it. But then like further into the song, I'm like, but like, what if you know, I have this like kind of fascination with molten glass, and I know it's absolutely sacrilegious to think of melting down Harry Clark, which isn't really what I was doing. But anyway, I was like, but if, you know, he let us melt this down, then we could be reunited. So that was sort of the backdrop. And then so for the video, I wanted to get into the Hewley. I always kind of had a dream that it would be cool to try and make it in as far as possible that window come to life, because there's just so much life in it. And we only actually managed to get into the Hewley for an hour and a half. And I also had when the intro to the song, it kind of reminded me of a ballerina spinning around, you know, if you open up a jewelry box. And so I then had this notion, wouldn't it be great if we could have a ballerina dancing in there as well? So we had an hour and a half to film the ballet and the window. It was very intense. And then get over to, I don't know if some of the artists might have heard of Salvatore of Lucan. He painted my album artwork, and we shot the rest of the video then in his studio, I think, just to sort of kind of show that like there's such a link between the like Harry Clark and his studio and the art, and in the song also I do kind of imagine, you know, like if life were a painting and the painter a rose, like there is a sort of a link to that reference in the song. So yeah, I sort of tried to bring all of that together in the video.
Okay, well, I'm going to show that because I think that's just a thing for your concert on the 8th of May in France, which is just after the opening. I think it's a Sunday and there's a barbecue and all that. And this is the painting you're referring to.
Yeah, that's the album cover.
Yeah. And the album is called Black Forest?
It is, yeah. There's
a
song on the album called Black Forest. Okay. And I mean, it's kind of a meaning that kind of is multi-layered to me anyway. It maybe began as a bit of a euphemism, but yeah, I think when you give something a title, then suddenly you see more and more things in it. Yeah, so that'll be out on vinyl in October, November time.
Okay. Okay. All right. And I think here we have the video. So we're going to watch that. So if you want to put yourself on mute, just for the purposes of this, and if you really want to hear it in full Technicolor, as I say, you can put earphones on. So here we go.
There is a road that runs wild and a story with hand-painted illustrations. Or is it a window? Stained glass, sorry Clark, wide-eyed nymphs. If I look through, do I touch you? Grand Central Hotel. Molten rainbow stream, naked salt crystal light. Painting brush strokes live, breastbones rise and sink. Watch, no hands and a sheet's endless breath, other lips and the first question that I asked you. Do you believe in soulmates? Do you believe in soulmates? Dearest Harry, Mr. Clark. 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 In her beauty the light flows. Kinda touch her for one night. And if life were a painting and the painter rose, it's your stigma, the flesh. No, she said love is not lavish. It sees and doesn't mind. Love is not lavish. It sees and doesn't mind. Love is not lavish. It sees and doesn't mind. Do you believe in? Do you believe in soulmates?
Clara, that was phenomenal. Absolutely wonderful.
It's kind of
You must
mad
have
to
heard-
show that video to a load of artists. I think
Well, exactly. I mean, that's what I think the beauty of it is, that the artists amongst us, the visual artists, will appreciate it so much, knowing Harry Clark so well. But your interpretation is just magnificent, and so many layers to it. I think it's wonderful, and a brilliant video.
It was a bit of I ran out of budget completely with the editor. You know, editing takes a while, and it was tricky, and so anyway, it was like myself and like my partner ended up downloading the crack of Premiere Pro and finished the edit, like, because the original one, the guy has a different aesthetic and he shot it beautifully, but it was, so we ended up, that's how we came up with putting it in black and white, because he'd kind of washed out the Harry Clarks, and I was like, we can't have the Harry Clark, you can turquoise. So the start went into black and white, and then I kind of like how in the end, just simply, it wasn't really planned that way, but it ended up kind of doing the Wizard of Oz thing then, when it goes into color. But that was just due to like necessity.
Exactly. Yeah, fantastic. So look, we're moving on, and I want to open it up to people for questions and answers. So we mightn't show the other video if that's okay with you, but I'll put a link to it if you like. Yeah, we might do that. So listen, congratulations. I hope you produce wonderful work from your residency there. I've no doubt you will. You're somebody that people need to pay attention to, because I'm sure you have a fantastic future, and I wish you every success with it.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Eamon and for organizing this opportunity to come in front of and meet you, and to Ciara and Gary. Like we're actually so blessed to be here. Yeah,
so you have a whole 2 weeks ahead of you to be creative. So well done you. Okay, we're going to open it up to everybody to ask questions if you like. Richard Pearce, this is also heartwarming, impressive, and inspirational. Congratulations. That's from Richard. Okay, listen, loads of amazing comments there about you and Kat and Gary. So we'll open it up to the floor, as we say. So any questions?
Alan, could I come in there just for a minute?
Sure, Eamon.
Yeah. One of the things that I would like to, number one, congratulations to all the artists who ended up there, but a huge congratulations to Ciara for what she's achieved. Again, putting on my other hat, the opportunities for Irish artists to actually work abroad are very small, and this is a huge opportunity, and long may it last. But it has taken blood, sweat, and tears for Ciara to get it to where it is now, and we all need to put our hands together and say, well done, Ciara, and yeah, great.
Here. Ciara, would you like to say a few words in response?
Well, that's a beautiful acknowledgement. Thank you very much. It is a massive project. It was a bigger project than I ever thought it was going to be, but I have to say it's a privilege. And I agree with Eamon when he says this will run for 30 years. It might run for longer, who knows, but certainly it will be an annual event. And we welcome applications from everyone. And yeah, this is the start of something very special, I'm sure.
It certainly sounds it. Yeah, thank you very much, Ciara, and thanks for allowing us into your place there. And I wish you every success with the exhibition in particular. Hello, Owen.
Oh, yes, I'd like to go back to Gary. I'm just enjoying the whole morning. That was marvelous work, I say, from Gary. And I asked him, what media is it? Oil, or I know it's mixed media, but is it mainly oil that you work with, Gary?
Thank you, Owen. I would use, generally I would start off using like a gesso just to get stuff prepared. And then it depends on whatever, it'd be a combination of acrylics and oil paint. Sometimes with canvas work and even paperwork, I'd sort of do work in gesso, and then when I'm finished, it's like a book with 2 chapters. I have the first chapter, which is getting to the stage where I think I've done enough to this point, and then I would introduce the oil in the second chapter, and follow what I've done, but wait for the change to come. And then on paperwork, I would use mixed media. I'd use. We're in the shop the other day. I got a receipt. I'd use receipts for artwork, for including in the artwork. I've got Lewis cards that I had brought over, so it'd be a combination of work.
Very good. Yeah, I love the work. It's great.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Yeah,
thank you.
And Ciara, that video was just superb. Really was superb. It was uplifting. Really was. And just to see Harry Clark's work introduced in that way too is lovely, and the voice is extraordinary. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And great question. It's lovely to hear. I keep interrogating Gary as well. so fascinating how he does it. It's so, I feel like I'm probably in the luckiest position getting to watch the evolution of those canvases. Here.
Okay, folks, I think we leave it there unless there's anybody else who'd like to say something.
Can I just come in before just before we leave?
Sure, Eamon.
Again, putting on my other hat, the Arts Council and the European Council of Artists have done research on the living and working conditions of artists. Ireland has come out bottom of the table, which is really surprising considering that we do support the arts in a great way. The average wage for a female artist in Ireland is €2,500 per year. The average wage for a male artist is €5,000 a year. Now, nobody, no matter how frugal you are, can live on that kind of wage. So what Ciara has done and what the John Richardson Residency will do is it exposes Irish artists to a new audience. That is hugely important, and one that we should be actually encouraging. You know, there is the whole art fair system in Europe and America. We should be encouraging our arts councils, both north and south, to start supporting artists almost like an industry, and that's where it needs to go. And again, I would like to say thanks to Ciara for this initiative, which is actually going to do a lot more for the name. It just won't be for the artists who are there. It'll be for right across the board. People will start looking at Irish art in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. Yeah. That's what we need very strongly right now.
Very, very well put, Eamon. And I absolutely empathize with that, because it's something that's close to my heart as well, is bringing Irish artists to a more international audience. And, you know, I'll be chatting about that at the end of this series, about a project to do with that. Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
I wanted to say very much a big thank you to everybody who has played any support in this, but I also want to mention particularly the people of the village here in Dampierre-sur-Boutonne, and the fact that they have been so receptive and so welcoming and so interested in the project that's going on here, which is of course something that you couldn't glean from this particular episode. And a big thank you to all of those wonderful French people who have opened up their arms with such enthusiasm to this whole event.
Very good. Very good. Thanks, Ciara. Absolutely. Okay, folks, see you next week. We have 3 more episodes to go in the current series, 3 more artists, and I know you're going to enjoy them. And so look forward to seeing it all be revealed, obviously, on the Wednesday, who the upcoming artist is. So thank you all to everyone who's been involved here, to the artists, to Ciara, to Eamon for being part of it as well. And I wish you a lovely weekend. Enjoy the residency and talk to you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.